Hey Kevin, how's it going?
It's going really well. Thank you.
I've checked out your film Up on Glass.
Up on the glass, yeah.
Glass, yeah. So hey, congratulations on this film.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate that.
So tell me how this film actually came about.
Um, well, I mean, it was like a 6-year journey. My wife and I ended up developing it together. Nikki Del Principe, she's Nikki Brown in the film, and she invited me to her family's cottage area, like in Lake Michigan, all those years ago. And I think born from that experience was the genesis of this story of this outsider character who grew up more working class or blue collar, um, coming into this environment and reconnecting with old friends from college that are doing quite well, at least in the kind of the worldly sense of capital and that kind of thing. So that was really the genesis, and I think partly was based upon my own experience, growing up in a more working class environment, and then just sort of that sense of feeling like one's going into this different space. And so I try to bring that to this character of Jack.
hmm so tell me about this cottage that you actually filmed at. What was it? Was this her cottage, or was this a new cottage that you have to acquire for production?
This was a cottage that was in her family for a little bit of time, and it was her parents' cottage at this point. And so it was already in the family, and it was available. And then this whole community that she grew up in. She grew up going out every summer to this area, even though she grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So she had this sort of this community that she'd been part of, for her entire life basically, and all these like really cool people that were supportive. And then that carried over to allowing us to shoot the film and just having a lot of support, not only with that location, but just help across the board.
It sounds like you had a real you obviously you have a really good relationship with your wife on this production. Could you elaborate us more on how this relationship actually works from private to film production? Because she wrote the script, you're using her parents' house, and you're directing the film.
Yeah, and we wrote the script together. So that was a piece of it. So we came together as writers, and that's really where our foundation was. We both went to USC in LA for an MFA in writing for screen and television, and that's where we met, some years ago. And then born from that friendship later on was our relationship and our marriage of last year. But there is a lot of overlap because we were able to get married last year in the same relative location out in that area where we shot the film. So that was really fun. But we work, really closely. Like she's someone that I have a lot of trust in, and she really was a great help. And she wore a lot of hats, like we all did. I was producing as well. She acted in a role, plus she was producing, and then she of course was a co-writer. So we work together and collaborate. And I definitely wouldn't want to have done this one without her, and I'd love to continue to work with her.
Well, obviously, you will be continuing to work with her. That's
Yes, that's true.
so. Tell me about this town, Shelby, Michigan. What's it like working there, and what were there difficulties trying to basically film a production in a very small town? I don't want to say out of no, in the middle of nowhere, but I've never been to Shelby, Michigan myself. So,
Well, I mean, in some ways it was fairly easy, I guess, in the sense of like that we were able to get everyone that we needed to come out and be with us. So, but we had cast from LA predominantly. We had one gentleman that was from Michigan, but all of the LA cast had some kind of ties to the Midwest and an understanding of that area. And then we had crew coming from basically Grand Rapids, Michigan, and then also from Buffalo, New York, where I'm originally from. So we sort of just all met in the middle, and it was kind of amazing to be able to negotiate a lot of that and sort it out. So I don't think it was terribly challenging, but yes, we did have to kind of deal with the complications of people coming from different areas and meeting in the middle, and then create that team effort. But I feel like we did a pretty good job at that. And then in terms of being there, like really it was pretty easy because it was like very laid back, and it was easy to secure locations ultimately for the most part, and there was just a lot of positivity. So in that sense, people were, I think, generally happy that we were there and supportive. So that really made life a little bit easier.
That sounds great. I mean, around the area for Shelby, it looks beautiful. I personally, I never seen a lakeside beach.
Hmm.
Um, Not to mention that was like just a walking distance from the house, and also you also had looked like sand dunes in the film. So talk about those areas.
Yeah, I mean, Lake Michigan is very beautiful, and it's very large. A lot of us in the cast that were coming from LA kept on, sort of slipping up and referring to it as the ocean at the time, because there is this kind of sense, wow, this is really big, and you get the presence of the water, and then the Silver Lake sand dunes. I sort of fell in love with that when I was first visiting the area and went out to see that. I'd never seen anything like that before, especially not in the Midwest or in Michigan. So that was really attractive to me, the petrified trees. And then there's this lake, this Silver Lake, that you can kind of look out and see as well. So that was just fascinating to me. That I would say that was a tough shoot in the sense of just that particular location. Like that day, it was very windy, and it was just, but so worthwhile, going there. And I'm really glad that we could share that place with other people, just like it was shared with me.
Were the dunes really close by to your shooting location?
I'd say about 15 minutes. A lot of things were about 15 minutes. When it came down to it, and people will always say, "Oh, yeah, 15 minutes. Maybe it's 20 minutes. Maybe it's 25 minutes." But relatively 15 minutes or so.
So when you're filming the production, because that was like an outdoor filming scenario, but you also had to film indoors inside the cottage, and I can't imagine the cottage being, how can you say, spacious enough.
Mhm.
And you probably have to film it in cramped spaces. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, like I think we set up the story thinking about the cottage, and there is that kind of class dynamic relationship. And in this setting, it was like Jack starts out in the basement of the cottage, so in that sense, like this American version of being kind of like beneath or on the lowest tier, and then he kind of comes up ultimately all the way to the bedroom. But because the place had 3 floors, that gave us some help, in terms of like having a lot of different areas to shoot and having it sort of involved in the metaphor of the film. On the other hand, like, you may have noticed some of the scenes that were like, a one shot sort of scene, and, we're in close quarters, and we're very, very intimate and to get what we needed to get done. But I think in a way, I think that, environment that we created with the cast and crew that was very community based and like family, at least for a period of time, and then those relationships have extended. I think that helped. It certainly allowed us to get a little bit more intimate in those close quarters, but I think it worked out pretty well.
Well, let's talk about your cast then. Let's
Mhm.
let's start with Chase, who plays Jack. I mean, he's basically anchoring the entire film.
Yeah.
Um, because I could easily split the film into 2 parts: the first part with the husband and second part with the wife. But let's talk about Chase, who basically has to be as a part on both parts of the film.
Hmm. Well, it's such an important role to cast, and I was really grateful to meet Chase and find Chase, and my friend Rachel Imbriglia, who's a casting director, set me up, and she had been suggesting for a while that I meet Chase even before I presented the film to her. So she just thought there'd be some kind of symmetry between us, and that was true. And it's a challenging role because there's a lot going on with Jack internally, especially in that first third of the movie. But he's not the most verbose character, sharing all his feelings early on, and then he starts to open up more. So, I think Chase just did a great job of having all that internal work going on, and so we could be with him and sort of sense how he feels through his eyes, etc. So I thought that was really well done by him, and I appreciate all his work in that regard.
Well, then let's round out the cast, because you basically recruited one actor to play the husband, one actor to play the wife, and they really didn't really interact
Right. Yeah.
for the film, which
Right.
which is almost like it's two films
Mm-hmm.
in its own sense. Could you talk about why they were perfect for their roles?
Well, I feel like Hunter Cross, who played Andy, the husband. I think that he really got this sort of character of this guy who had he had understanding of this guy who had kind of success, but had some maybe self-doubt and had some struggles, and that was competitive. And I think Hunter really understood that, and I think that really helped, set the table and set the tension between, say, Chase's character of Jack and then Hunter's character of Andy. And I feel like they played well off of each other. And then Chelsea Kurtz, she came in, like you said, in terms of the film, it was the same way shooting. She came in through half the film, and sort of she really was a presence. It was like all of a sudden, oh, Chelsea is here as Liz, and we had been sort of anticipating her coming, because it had been all guys on set primarily in terms of the cast, and we were all anticipating her being there. And then, she really, I think, really got the sensitivity of Liz and the struggle. And I think how Liz, in her own way, is a little bit lost, I think, and that kind of helps connect Liz to Jack. You could see that they're both trying to figure out, who they are at this place in their life, and for her, who she is in her marriage and apart from her marriage. So I think that in that way, the connection between all three characters, like Jack being in the middle of Andy and Liz, and then maybe perhaps all of them feeling a little bit uncertain about their place in life, and then these tensions and these past histories kind of like really boil over.
Absolutely. And the idea of the lightning glass, where did that actually came from, and what was the rock that you guys actually used on production?
Yeah, I mean, we did secure some kind of it was some, I forget what type of stone that is, or what type of glass it is, but I know we had a few pieces that Nikki secured that she was able to get for us. I think it's called a fulgurite. Fulgurite, I think, is what I think that's what it's called. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that. But in terms of the idea for it, Nikki had told me this story about that she knew from childhood, of just that lightning would strike and glass would be found or would come from that. And I just felt like that was very powerful, just this sort of intensity of nature, and then this creation of something so beautiful. And then I think ultimately it started to become a metaphor for, that sort of choices and like living on the precipice, that there is this aspect of nature and the wild, and then also something about sort of dealing with choices and humanity, and just how precarious that can ultimately be. And in the film, we do see that's like Jack could have made a different choice here or there, and then all of a sudden the trajectory is different, and that seems to be true for all of the characters.
Yeah, I knew there was a metaphor that was connected to that stone. I just felt that Jack was either making bad choice, or was just not lucky in his own way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that I've thought a lot about Jack a lot is that, on one hand, when things don't turn out for someone's life, a lot of times we talk about, well, it's either like their personal character, like they have poor character, or it's circumstances, like social circumstances or even luck. And I think for Jack, what attracted me to this story is just that it seems like all that stuff is going on, like it seems like in terms of, who he is distrustful of institutions or maybe relationships based upon his experience, and that sort of sets him up. Alternatively, you could imagine that even if that's true, he could have made a different choice. And then there's just the circumstance of having perhaps bad luck that say the altercation goes the way it does and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well, it's a fine movie, so I do have to admit that. Now, for yourself, I know it's a silly question to ask, especially in times like this. Is how are you staying creative? Towards working towards your next project?
Well, for both Nikki and I, since we're writers, we always have that. So, we're always writing. And for me, I published my first novel, I, Animal, a couple of years ago. So right now I'm working on a book of short stories that I'm almost finished with. So that's something I can do now, even with the pandemic and all this stuff. And then Nikki and I are creating a small press arm, basically, of our production company, Save Them Wild Dogs. And we're going to start publishing material from other people. So we're publishing our first book. It's a book of poetry by this poet named Brian Brogan. And that's going to be coming out in November, called Tracking the Masked Dawn. So we have all these literary pieces that are still going. And then Nikki and I have hopes of turning that book, I, Animal, into our next project and shooting that out where I'm from in Buffalo, New York area. So that's on our minds, but we're sort of focusing on the push of this film, getting that first book out for the small press, and then working on our own writing work. Nikki's working on a novel, for myself, the book of short stories, and then slowly developing the next film version, hopefully, of I, Animal, to be shot in the Buffalo area, Western New York area. So we've been fortunate, I think, because we're indie people, and we recently even moved to Memphis from LA. We were in LA for 9 years. We've been fortunate to just keep going, because I feel like the indie life and the art life never stops, even though the world could be somewhat chaotic for, I think, most of us right now. And so in a way, that's been kind of a blessing that we can just keep being creative and keep doing our work day to day.
I'm very glad, because I'm always supportive of indie projects like yours. So absolutely. And one more thing before I let you go. What was it like directing your own wife on on production? Was that difficult?
Yeah, that's funny. Generally, no. Generally, it was not difficult because we know each other so well, and I directed her in a couple of shorts previously. So we, even in terms of that relationship, we had some practice at how to communicate. I know the hardest thing for her was just juggling so much, and I think that's one thing. Like, as her spouse and as a director, I would have loved to, in our next project, just take a few things off her plate. So that she would just be able to maybe enjoy some. If she did act again, she could enjoy that. And I think she did, but even more so. But overall, I love just working with Nikki, and so it was all good.
Excellent. That's a great answer. I'm sure she appreciates that.
Thank you, sir.
Well, anyways, hey, thank you very much for speaking with me, and congratulations once again on your indie film. I'm sure a lot of people will. When they watch it, they will enjoy it. Hey, thank you very much for speaking with me.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Hey, not a problem. Bye now.
Bye-bye.